So what's going on, guys? My name's Chopper and welcome everybody back to the channel. Now in this video, PUBG has been notorious and it's basically made its name in the gaming community for having some of the most involved gunplay and some of the hardest weapons to learn ever. As you guys know, a big draw to this game is the intricate gunplay that's so satisfying to learn in this game, and so today we're going to be looking at the top 10 hardest to control weapons. Now of course, before we go ahead and jump into the list, if you guys enjoyed the video and if you're already subscribed to the channel, just go ahead and leave a like. I'd appreciate that a lot. And if you're not already subscribed, make sure to go ahead and do that and help our way out to 250,000 subscribers. Thank you so much, guys. And also, I want you guys to make your predictions on what this list is going to look like, ranging from the number 10 spot all the way up to the number 1 spot. And so make sure you watch through all the way to the end of the video to see how accurate your list was compared with mine. And then at the end of the video, let me know down below in the comment section how close your list was to the one that was on the video. But with that being said, guys, let's get started. So kicking off here and coming in at our number 10 spot, I think I'm going to give this to the M16. Now, this gun isn't really too bad when it comes to overall recoil per shot, and the management, especially in single fire, is pretty manageable for, I'd say, every single player, even regardless of skill level. But the problem comes in when you look at the burst fire. The big issue for me, and I think a lot of other people with the M16 burst fire, is that the horizontal recoil is a little bit too unpredictable, and it's so inconsistent if you want to put off more than one burst at a time. I mean, to be fair though, you can do a lot yourself to control it, as well as like finding attachments. A compensator works wonders for it. The stock does great things for it as well, but using a completely naked M16 and trying to burst fire it is just, it's really not a good option. And even though the M16 is still best technically used as a single fire weapon, the burst really isn't ideal. Although it's an option, it's one of those things where you can't really learn the burst fire to some degree. Like, even as much as you practice with it, you probably can't laser beam the burst fire just because it is random at the end of the day. But all in all, it's not one of the hardest guns to learn in the game, and that's why it's coming in at our number 10 spot. Okay, moving along here into our number 9 spot is going to be the P18C or the Glock. Now, this gun I really feel like is the definition of getting the short end of the stick. The big problem with this weapon is that you almost have to run a suppressor because the muzzle flash is too much to see where you're aiming. But if you run the suppressor, then you can't use your iron sight, so then you need a red dot. And by that point, you basically have full attachments on this weapon, which by that point in the game, you probably have already found a better weapon to begin with. One of the good markers to tell about how good a weapon is in the game, it's not the only marker, but it's certainly one you can rely on, is how much you're dying by that weapon. And I honestly don't think I've even lost to this weapon in literally months. I might have the least deaths in the entire game to this weapon. If not this weapon, then probably something like a sawed-off or an R45, but things that are just generally just as bad as this gun is. But needless to say, it's not an easy gun to get control of, especially if you don't have any attachments. Like, good luck trying to use a fully naked P18C. It just ain't gonna happen for you, bud. Okay, but moving on and coming in at our number 8 spot, I think probably was harder to control in the past, but still maybe deserves a spot on this list. I'm gonna give this to the MK47 Mutant. Now, this gun's kind of interesting because it's underwent probably some of the most changes that a weapon has ever seen in PUBG's history. So this weapon started out as being probably the worst AR to hit the game. It was meant to be the M16's replacement, just as with the 7.62 class, but its big issue, what was holding it back, was that the handling on it was just so awkward, and then players could not get a good feel for it. There was a couple people that swore by it, but all in all, it was a gun that like players would just pass by because of its really weird recoil control. Not too long ago though, however, the patch came out with the MK47 Mutant where a tactical stock could be attached, and that literally made all the difference in the world for this gun. It went from being like a really bad assault rifle to a viable weapon now. Even despite that patch though, the MK47 Mutant isn't the most popular weapon in the game, but it's at least usable now. But in my opinion, it's still somewhat difficult to control no matter what. It just doesn't handle quite like anything else in the game, and in my opinion, you really need attachments for this weapon as well if you want it to be useful. A light grip is absolutely astounding on it, as well as a vertical grip, and you really need the stock. If you've got a compensator and a sight, then that's just icing on the cake, but it's pretty good other than that. It's going to sit comfortably at the number 8 spot because it's really not terrible. But coming in at the number 7 spot, guys, is the VSS. Now, there's two properties in particular that make this difficult to control. The first one being the weird bullet velocity, like having to account for that. You do have to control your weapon differently and learn it amongst many others if you want to use the VSS properly, but also the full auto spray is very hard to learn with the VSS because of like the weird horizontal bounce that it has. It doesn't behave like any other gun in the game. These are all pretty unique, but if you put the time and effort into actually learning the VSS, then it can be generally effective. Now, something being effective and also being viable or competitive are all completely different definitions. I don't think the VSS is competitive against, all the other better DMRs in the game, but it's certainly something that can stand against other weapon. Regarding the behavior and the properties of the VSS, I really hope in the future PUBG adds more weapons that are similar to this, that just have like some kind of like funky attribute that none of the other weapons have and that require like another skill gap to learn. It adds another layer of fun to the game in my opinion. And while somewhat difficult to do, it is worth learning this weapon in my opinion. But moving on from that and coming in today at the number 6 spot, I'm actually going to say this is going to be the UMP 45. Now I want to make this very clear. It has to be this version of the UMP in particular. The old UMP 9 doesn't quite feel as bad. And I don't think it's necessarily the recoil about this weapon that's hard to control. I think it's more of the fire rate plus the bullet velocity, and in combination with that makes the gun feel very like clunky and awkward. I've seen from countless streamers, pro players, and just even you guys in the comments saying that the weapon just feels absolutely garbage now. Whatever it is, at the end of the day, maybe it's a combination of a lot of things. It just doesn't feel as a good weapon to use, and I think a lot of you guys will agree with that. But yeah, the UMP has to come in at the number 6 spot. Taking the number 5 spot is going to be none other than the brand new Uzi. The regular micro Uzi or the Uzi Pro doesn't really matter. This weapon has underwent a lot of changes as well, but despite it being a hard gun to learn in my opinion, I think the weapon performance and its effectiveness is absolutely fantastic. If you know how to put yourself in situations where this weapon is best used, so up close and personal, you know, a lot more indoor fights instead of long range stuff, combining this with like a sniper or a DMR is great, but you need to learn the weapon first of all, otherwise it's very difficult to use. Most important attachments for this are the extended mag, compensator, and red dot. The stock on it isn't super important, although it will cut down on that raw recoil that you will have, but it does decrease your aim down sight speed by a little bit. So it is a little bit of a trade-off if you want to run the stock on the Uzi Pro, but I think it's worth it regardless depending on how you're going to use it. Coming in at the number 4 spot though is going to be the Tommy gun, a pretty obvious choice if you ask me. And the thing with the Tommy gun is it has a generally large amount of kick even despite it not having a grip. The only grip in the game that actually works on it is of course the vertical, and you can also not add a sight. So all these things combined makes the gun very, very difficult to handle. To me, the control kind of feels like the UMP 45, but somehow worse, however that's possible. I think if the Tommy gun ever got an update to where you could run something like a red dot, then that would be one step in making the control a lot easier to handle, but also another step into making it an absolute laser. Now, moving on, ladies and gentlemen, coming in at our number 3 spot is going to be the SLR. Now, this gun, I think a lot of you guys agree, is one of the most odd guns to control in the game. The raw kick per bullet is just so intense that it makes it really difficult to get follow-up shots. However, what I will say about this gun is if you really do put in the time, you can learn this weapon quite a bit. And what I've been doing recently is learning how to sort of rapid fire the SLR, even with the scope. And in my opinion, that's a complete skill gap in and of itself, learning how to not only single tap the SLR at long range, but at medium range, fire it quickly with the scope. It's like two completely different handling properties. Rapid firing this weapon, or really any other DMR for that matter, is absolutely great for taking down vehicles that are driving by. If you don't want to shoot out the driver and you just maybe want to blow up the car, this is the way to do it. Getting all the recoil patterns down and stuff, like when you're shooting it quickly, is not easy because it's really not meant to be used that way, and so it's going to be extremely difficult to get those to be learning. But in my opinion, it's definitely worth the cost that it takes. No matter what though, the SLR had to be somewhere on this list, and I think the number 3 spot is a pretty fair rating for that one. But it would be a shame if we put the SLR on this list without putting its big brother at the number 2 spot, and this is going to be the Mark 14. Now it's interesting, right? Because the big differences between the SLR and the Mark 14 is that the MK14 is just much better at single tapping, and the reason for that is because the recenter speed just happens so much quicker. So for example, whenever you shoot one bullet, it recenters almost instantly, so you can get a second follow-up shot that's already on target. The SLR doesn't do that quite as well, but what the big difference here is that the MK14 in full auto, regardless of what your attachments are, or if you have a red dot or a scope on it, it's gonna be difficult to control. The best thing you can do for yourself is get a compensator and a cheek pad, and also the extended mag for it if you're gonna be spraying. If you're gonna be single tapping it, these attachments aren't quite as important, but don't spray with the scope, especially if you're not really comfortable with the weapon. Now, before we unveil our number 1 spot of the hardest to control weapon in PUBG, I would like to give a quick honorable mention to another weapon that I didn't want to forget, and this is going to be the Deagle. Now, don't get it twisted. I got a lot of love for my boy the Deagle, but regardless of that, it doesn't make it any easier to use. It is a tough pistol to get a handle on. I think the secret is trying to predict which way it's going to kick between shots. It either goes left or right, so if you can sort of get that down, then you'll be in much better shape using this weapon. I feel like that's the sauce. In my opinion, this is definitely one of those guns that is worth practicing with, and is absolutely definitely effective if you know what you're doing. But finally, ladies and gentlemen, coming in today at the #1 spot on this list, the hardest gun to control in PUBG, in my opinion, is gonna have to be the barrel. Now, this may or may not come as a surprise to you guys. A lot of you probably saw this coming, but you might be asking yourself, okay, why wasn't the AKM on this list? I feel like it definitely could have been on this list at some point, but I didn't want to be redundant, as it's just a little bit easier to control than a barrel. Also, not to mention the fact that the AK doesn't improve that much with attachments, but the barrel is absolutely necessary to have attachments. It basically becomes a completely different weapon once you have it fully kitted out versus when you first find it. And I think a lot of you guys who are barrel fans or just use this weapon, you know, kind of a lot will agree with me. I think without a doubt, it has to be the hardest gun to overall control in the game. And yeah, that is going to be the top 10 list. Really hope you guys did enjoy today's video. And also let me know down below in the comment section how accurate your list was compared with mine. I'd love to know what you guys think as well. And also drop a like if you guys enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you are brand new before you go. And also make sure to go follow me on Twitch, where you're going to see daily live streams. Link to that is down below in the description. And I'd appreciate a follow. I'll see you over there on the streams. But anyways, guys, I'll see you on the next video or the next live stream. Take it easy and peace out.